There's tons of sexual images and sexual titillation in our media, but there's not clear talk about sex to help people understand sex. And so many of our clients really don't understand their sexuality very well. Now, Dr. Ruth Collin, I want to read a couple quotes from her just to get us started. She says, each one of us has a sex life, whether completely internal and wished for or actually lived in real time. So the key point is everybody has a sex life. Doesn't have to be just acted out sex. It could be a total internal fantasy world sex, but it's still a sex life. So we must take this as a given that everybody has a sex life. Some clients may have made their peace with whatever expression is or has been in their sex life, including asexuality. Some are totally okay with that. But others haven't made peace with this sex life that they have. And so they live with grief, they live with anger, they're mad about lost time or missed experience, or they live with a deep loneliness of skin hunger or touch, just longing to be touched, deprivation or body hatred. Many feel robbed, many feel cheated. I think that's so well said. Then she says this, beginning my journey towards sex therapy certification, I was surprised to learn just how wide the range is of sexual fantasy, sexual pleasure, and sexual behavior. I was much less sexually intelligent than I thought I was. In turn, I learned how narrow and arbitrary the window viewed as normal is. So our cultures developed kind of this window of what we consider normal sexual behavior. And what she began to realize is that that's quite narrow, and who made up those rules? It seems arbitrary. So although the media bombard us with sexual imagery and titillation, we continue to be hard-pressed to find and access reliable and useful sexuality information. The subject of sex still appears to be a point of shame or taboo or ignorance. Many of our clients struggle to understand. So there's tons of sexual images and sexual titillation in our media, but there's not clear talk about sex to help people understand sex. And so many of our clients really don't understand their sexuality very well, is the point. They wonder, what is wrong with me? And a lack of reliable reference to measure against, and nobody's safe to ask about sex. And so their brain goes to, well, it's just a natural drive, so it should be kind of automatic that you know what to do. Like in the movies, you should just automatically know what your partner likes and how to achieve that. And all the more when you're in a very self-reliant world, it's certainly anything but natural to think that one should need help in figuring out what normal is. So well said. So I want to go to kind of four major ways that the sexual drive can get distorted or twisted. So the obvious one is sexual abuse. That does so much damage in a child. That distorts sexuality sometimes, and this is hard to say but important to say, sometimes almost irreparably. I have worked for many years in counseling people with sexual abuse, and sadly what I've seen with some is that they may never heal to the point of being able to engage in a healthy, intimate sexual relationship. There's just too much damage been done. Too many things get triggered today as soon as they go to engage in sex. It's just so sad. Others, they may finally eventually get to a more healthy sexual place and be able to have a healthy sexual relationship with somebody, but it could take years to get there. And so great patience is required. Tons of work is required. There's not a magic fix to just make it go away. The second thing is neglect. And most have never really considered that before. The third thing is to grow up in a family where one of your parents has unresolved issues around sex. So anything that is sexual in the child, the parent overreacts to. And that can do tremendous damage and really distort the sexual drive of the child. The fourth thing is parents or growing up in an environment that has very repressive teaching around sexuality, almost like puritanical. So some of you have grown up where it's been taught or you just pick up that sexual desires, having sexual desires, that you're bad, that you're doing something wrong, that's a terrible thing to have sexual desires. Then some of you have heard kind of sex is dirty. It's an obligation. It's a necessity to have kids, but it's kind of a dirty thing. Some of you have grown up where it's the job of women to make men happy. So women should be willing to sacrifice all their needs and their desires and do whatever their husband wants. It's all about the man. Some of you grew up where it was wrong to learn about sexuality, explore sexuality, experiment sexually, read about the subject in depth. That would be like you're indulging something really bad in you. Some of you grew up where you can enjoy sex a little bit, but don't enjoy it too much. That then would be having an idol in your life where you're kind of loving something more than God, and that would be a sin. That would be wrong. Some grew up within very patriarchal systems where women were accused of being at fault for causing sexual desires in men. So you're dressing too provocatively. You're acting in ways that are causing men to lust for women. So it's the woman's fault. So men didn't have to take ownership for their sexual desires. It was blamed on the women, and women therefore had to dress a certain way to not evoke sexual desires in men. Others in a patriarchal society where the men always were to initiate sex, the women just respond. And the women better respond positively if the man initiated it. So I could go on, but for many of you, you grew up with all kinds of teaching around sexuality that actually really messed you up when it came to developing your sexual drive in a healthy way.